Good afternoon. My name is Amanda Rivera. I'm the hearing examiner presiding over today's case. The date is October 31st, 2024, and this is case SEZ2022-00013 and VAR 2024-00014. It is a concurrent request for a special exception and a variance in the Lehigh Acres planning community. Because this is a quasi-judicial hearing, all evidence and testimony must be taken under oath. So if you intend to speak, if you could please raise your hand. Do you swear or affirm the testimony you will provide is the truth?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. We do not have members of the public here today, so I'll dispense with those instructions and we can begin whenever you're ready.
Thank you.
Madam Hearing Examiner, if I could just interrupt, I do have
Thank
the
you.
affidavit of publications for both advertisements for this one.
Okay, thank you. So
For
I
the
will
record.
accept that as Staff Exhibit 2. Staff Exhibit 1 was pre-labeled as the staff report. And I will take those together as a composite exhibit. Let me mark that, and then we can begin. Okay, thank you.
Of course. Good morning, Madam Hearing Examiner, or good afternoon. Stacy Ellis Hewitt, representing the applicant. I've previously been accepted as an expert witness in land use and planning matters, and I request to be accepted as such today.
Yes, thank you.
And I do have the sign-in sheet and a copy of the PowerPoint and an 11/17 site plan.
Okay, thank you. So let me take these in turn. All right, so I have the applicant's 48-hour letter was applicant exhibit A, so then applicant exhibit 1. Let's see what order. I'll do the presentation first. And then applicant exhibit 2 will be the site plan, and this is the same one that I have in the staff
Yes,
report?
yes.
Okay.
It's just a larger, cleaner version.
Thank you, I appreciate that. Okay.
All right, thank you. With me today is the applicant, Michael Gay, General Manager with Adam Homes. The site's located, it's about half an acre, located at 5004 and 5006 Lee Boulevard, approximately 160 feet northwest of the intersection of Lee Boulevard and Lee Street, and it's also approximately 1 mile west of Gunnery Road. The request is for a special exception pursuant to Land Development Code Section 33-1431 to allow a real estate sales office in a former model home on an arterial road in the RS1 zoning district, and a concurrent variance from Land Development Code Section 10-285A, which requires a minimum connection separation of 440 feet for principal arterials in future urban areas to allow the existing parking lot to remain with a connection separation of approximately 190 feet to Lee Street and approximately 120 feet to the former model home at 5008 Lee Boulevard. Typically, this could have been processed administratively, but for the Land Development Code compliance with the special exception, we requested to bring it forward together. We are in the central urban future land use category, which is the urban core and appropriate for commercial development. The surrounding development to the southeast is an existing daycare center that was also approved by special exception by the same section of the code, the 33-1431. And I do have a copy of that approval, if you would like a copy for the record.
You could, yes.
Of course. And while we're on that subject, I also have the historic approvals for this case.
Thank you,
Okay.
yes. So I'll accept those both. Applicant exhibit 3 will be the SEZ 2013, and I'll just separate them by property, so that will remain as the sole exhibit there. And then applicant exhibit 4 would then be the composite. You have them all together?
Yes.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Okay, thank you.
Of course. So the daycare's to the southeast. To the north, there's a vacant single-family lot and a existing single-family residence zoned RS1. To the northwest is a single-family home that was actually included in the original special exception for the subject property, but is not included in the current application. And then we have Lee Boulevard to the southwest and CPD with retail uses.
Just the one to the west you said was a former, has that been converted to something else?
It's now a single-family home.
Okay.
This is the extensive background. It is all in the staff report. I can walk through it if you'd like, or if we're all in agreement, I can, you
The
know.
only one that I had questions about was the 2010 approval, because that seemed to be when this landscape plan popped up, and I wasn't sure what was the significance in that year that prompted the need for additional buffering.
I believe it was because of the changes in the ordinance, potentially, that it was just getting more scrutiny because they were no longer want, and if staff has further information on that, please share.
That's what we're under the assumption of.
Okay, so basically around that time is right when the ordinances started coming in that they didn't want any more model homes within 300 feet of any collector or arterial in Lehigh. They just didn't want them anymore. But there were some that had been grandfathered. So I believe since that was coming to fruition with the Lehigh plan, I think they just had more scrutiny on the review at that time and then added those additional buffers to allow it to continue. And then after that, the LDO was installed those required buffers. And then there was another extension in 2015, and then 2019 was the final when they said, you know, that no more extensions. And that's why we're here with this request today.
And that was for 3 years. So did that expire in 2022, or is it still operating as a model now?
It's still operating, but the application was filed in 2022. It's just been working through the process, so. The staff report does recommend approval. The applicant's in agreement with the staff report recommendation for approval, and I do request to incorporate the staff report and the 48-hour notice and attachments into my testimony today. This is just a closer-up aerial demonstrating the extensive buffers that were installed and are in place on site. As noticed in the 48-hour notice, there was an accident that took out some of the hedges, and he's in the process of getting that fixed, as well as this is going to require a limited review development order to add additional hedges through the driveway, which I'll get to on the site plan. This is the proposed site plan. We did provide notes on the site plan that lead to the alternate landscape betterment plan that will be required as part of an LDO for this to continue. And it also references the requirement for the proposed cross-access easement, which are two new things with this request. With this request will be the cross-access easement will be required as part of the review, and will also be taking out a 3-foot strip of the concrete to continue the hedge to provide further buffering. And even though this is curbed, so the driveway isn't being used anyway, just to further deter anyone from using the driveway. And it also depicts the open space and the compliance for the parking. So this is the site plan, and it's no real that's the only change we're proposing is that cross-access easement and the 3-foot strip of concrete being removed.
I noticed on the open space, I had a question about that. It showed the required and the provided. Is that being addressed somewhere else in the LDO that the numbers aren't?
There's something wrong with that.
It seemed that way. It was a large
Yes.
discrepancy, so it seemed like, I don't know if there's a typos in some way that.
There must be. Thank you for bringing that up. It wasn't, I need to look at that.
Okay.
If maybe I can have a moment after the presentation
Certainly.
to kind of do some calculations there. I appreciate, thank you for bringing that up.
Absolutely. We're going to attach the site plan as a condition, I think that you actually proposed, so I want to be sure that it's correct, whatever.
Definitely, 100%.
Thank you.
The land development code and the request does the request does comply with the required findings in the land development code, section 34-145C3A. Would you like me to go through all the policies? Staff and applicant are in agreement. So I just wanted to put that on the record, and also that we also comply with the finding review criteria in Land Development Code Section 34-145B3 for the variance. And with that, that concludes my presentation.
I had a few questions. So will the buffers change from what's currently there? Because this is a unique circumstance, right? Where you're moving from the special exception essentially into the longevity now that you're going to
Yes.
have without the requirements of Note 6 attaching. But it's akin to a commercial use at this point. So are there any additional buffers, or are you held to commercial standards now that you're doing that?
In coordination with staff, the plan is to, and I believe it's referenced in the condition on the plan as well, there was the LDO for the landscape betterment plan, yes, it's referenced in the actual note on the plan. It's based on the approval of that landscape betterment plan, which did look at as commercial because of those pending, because of the changes in the code. That at that time, they required the 30-foot buffer and an alternate betterment plan to comply with the code as best as possible. So the plan was to not put specifics on what type of plantings. We were just going to condition it to that LDO, but it really calls down the specifics on the plant size or the plant types, and we staff recommended that we put some flexibility in there just so that if there isn't that plant species available or whatnot, just to have the requirements for what it has to meet as far as the size and the amount and type of trees or shrubs, but not the specifics on the exact LDO. But the LDO will be required to comply with what the site plan still demonstrates. But the basis of the notes that talk about single native hedge row and the call outs are all consistent with what was provided on the LDO approval that is part of the staff report.
Okay, that was one of my questions because it is referenced in that note. So I was going to ask if this needed to be appended as part of the exhibits to what will ultimately be the resolution governing this case moving forward. But it sounds like you don't want to do that because you'll be amending the DO in some fashion potentially subsequent to this case.
It will be, so I think staff's when we met with environmental and discussed the case, they wanted the site plan to not be so specific. So it's included by reference. So I don't know if we definitely need it attached as a condition because there could be some flexibility and those plant species might change. So the note was mostly to reference where it came from and to identify that this has already been reviewed and found compatible.
From the 2011 LDO.
Correct.
And then my next question is, this properties are still independently strapped and platted. Was there any discussion to combine them now that you're removing the access to the western lot?
It hasn't been discussed, and I don't believe it's required.
I don't know that it's required, but you're treating it as a cohesive development, and it's operating that way. And at present, up until now, all the approvals have contemplated the separate access points, at least on the site plans, but now
Right.
we're blocking that off to remove the access to that lot. So I have concerns about just making sure that that connectivity is tied together. I don't know if that's been discussed, or you can discuss it when you review the open space, if we're going to take a break in a little bit. That's just something that I wanted to ask
Thank you, I appreciate that.
about. I think that was the extent of my questions for now.
Okay.
Well, I guess just the last one I had is, what level of activity are you anticipating? It's changing now again from model home to real estate office. So is there any anticipation that you're going to have more site activity in terms of what the impacts might be to the surrounding residential, or is it about the same?
About the same. That's what we anticipate.
Okay. Where is it serving now? I mean, I assume this is a single lot. You're not within a larger subdivision as you would
No,
usually
it's
be for a real estate
The
office.
Lehigh area, Lehigh Acres area.
Okay, so it's used as a display center for all of the different home types and locations that you're constructing?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. I'm ready for the staff whenever you're ready.
Thank you.
Thank you. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Madam Hearing Examiner. For the record, Mary Sue Gross, Senior Planner with the Department of Community Development Zoning Section. I've been previously qualified as an expert witness in land use planning, the Lee County Land Development Code, and the Comprehensive Plan. I'd like to ask to do so again today.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you. If I can approach, I do have a copy of my PowerPoint presentation for you.
Yes, thank you. That will be Staff Exhibit 3. Thank you.
Okay, I'll begin with a request and recommendation. Try not to belabor it too much. The applicant is requesting a special exception approval pursuant to LDC Section 33-1431 to convert the existing model home to allow a real estate office on an approximately half-acre property. A concurrent request for a variance from LDC Section 10285 was submitted as well, which requires a minimum connection separation of 440 feet for principal arterials in future urban areas to allow a minimum connection separation on Lee Boulevard of 190 feet from the existing parking lot access to Lee Street and 120 feet to the former model home parking lot on 5008 Lee Boulevard to the west. Staff has recommended approval for the special exception and the variance request. A little background on the property. It is located at 5004 and 5006 Lee Boulevard, approximately 160 feet northwest of Lee Boulevard and Lee Street, and approximately 1 mile west of Gunnery, and does consist of those two strap numbers. Properties within the central urban future land use category and within the Lehigh Acres community plan area, and does reside in the RS1 zoning district. Properties to the northeast and west of the subject property are zoned RS1, and the property to the south across Lee Boulevard is zone CPD. The applicant held a public information meeting pursuant to the requirements of LDC Section 33-1401 for special exception and for the variance request, and provided staff with the meeting minutes. And both meetings were held at the subject property at 5006 Lee Boulevard on July 19th, 2023 for the special exception, and July 1st, 2024 for the variance. Covering Lee Plan LDC Section 34-145C3, following slides will demonstrate how the applicant has met the listed criteria for the special exception. I won't belabor Lee Plan policies too much. I will kind of just run through what policies they have been consistent with. That's the policy 1.1.3 for the central urban future land use category. It is a best described as the urban core of the county, and the request to convert the model home use to a real estate office offers the public a service to the community and is compatible with the purpose and intent of the central urban future land use, fulfilling policy 1.1.3. It is consistent with objective 2.1, 2.2, and policy 2.2.1 for promoting contiguous and compact growth and fostering new growth in future urban areas. The applicant has provided a letter of availability from FGUA stating that currently they provide only water to the subject property. Applicant has acknowledged that the existing model home and the proposed conversion to real estate office will generate well below the threshold of 5,000 gallons of sewage per day, and the proposed development does not meet the threshold for connection to sanitary sewer, fulfilling standards 4.1.1 and 4.1.2. For policy 5.1.5, that states that development must protect existing and future residential areas from any encroachment of uses that are potentially destructive to the character and integrity of the residential environment. As we know, the subject property does abut residential neighborhoods to the north and west, and to the east, a child care facility has continuously operated as a model home in the location since 2002. Real estate office is an allowable use by special exception in the RS1 zoning district, and Chapter 33 of the Land Development Code does provide requirements for enhanced landscaping between the commercial and residential uses. County and environmental staff require conditions prior to the development order approval on landscape buffers in that special exception that Stacy discussed earlier from SEZ2010-00011, and the applicant did fulfill that condition requirement in LDO 2011-00190. Again, the applicant did hold the public information meetings required under Objective 17.3 and fulfilling policies 17.3.3 and 17.3.4 for both the special exception and variance. For goal 25 of the Lehigh Acres Community Plan, it ensures that continued development and redevelopment converts the largely single-use, antiquated, pre-platted area into a vibrant residential and commercial community. As previously discussed, the subject property does reside in the central urban future land use, and it is categorized by the urban core of the community, and that makes the real estate office a compatible use with Goal 25. Applicant is providing a cross-access easement to an existing daycare to the southeast for a future parking lot interconnect should the adjacent use redevelop, which will allow the subject property access to Lee Street as an alternate to Lee Boulevard. LDC sections 33-1430 and 33-1431 address model homes on arterial roadways in Lehigh, and the request to convert the model home to the real estate office is compatible with that LDC. The subject properties are developed sites already containing no environmentally critical or sensitive areas or natural resources. As previously discussed, again, the property abuts those residential neighborhoods to the north and west, and it has continuously operated as a model home in the location since 2002. And again, they provided the required condition buffers from that special exception 2010-00011 and fulfilled in LDO 2011-00190. The applicant has stated they will provide extensive buffers to the maximum possible, ensuring continued compatibility with those existing and planned uses in the area. And the site plan provided by the applicant does demonstrate those buffers, and an LDO will be filed to implement an alternate landscape betterment plan consistent with LDC section 33-1431B. The request will not be injurious to or impact the surrounding neighborhood or be detrimental to the public welfare. The subject property does abut those residential neighborhoods, as we discussed, to the north and west, and the conversion to real estate office is an allowable use by the special exception. Established buffers along the north and west property line ensure that continued compatibility and the existing and planned uses. And the alternate landscape betterment plan will be consistent with LDC section 33-1431. The request to convert the existing model home use to real estate office is in compliance with zoning and other applicable regulations. Real estate offices are an allowable use in the RS1 district by special exception and will be compatible with the purpose and intent of the central urban future land use category. For variance criteria, as stated, the applicant included a concurrent request for a variance from LDC section 10-285A, which requires a minimum connection separation of 440 feet for principal arterials in future urban areas, to allow an existing connection separation of 190 feet to remain on Lee Boulevard between the existing parking lot access and the county-maintained minor collector road of Lee Street, and the 120 feet between the property's Lee Boulevard access and the former model home located on 5008 Lee Boulevard to the west. LDC Section 10-104 authorizes the director to grant deviations from technical standards for intersection separation. So covering the Lee Plan, LDC Section 34-145B3 for variance criteria. The pre-platted nature of the Lehigh Acres community and the existing approved parking lot create the inherent exceptional condition that create a hardship of an unreasonable burden that is unique to this parcel. Access for the subject property is limited to Lee Boulevard, a 6-lane arterial roadway, and LDC sections 33-1430 and 33-1431 provide for redevelopment of former model homes on arterial roads in the Lehigh Acres planning community. The exceptional conditions are not the result of actions of the property owner taken subsequent to the adoption of the ordinance. The parking lot and model home were existing and approved development. And the applicant is proposing to keep the existing approved parking lot access, and the approved variance is the minimum requirement that will relieve the unreasonable burden. The existing access has been previously approved and is proposed to remain in its existing location. Site plan to the former model home is being modified to facilitate future cross-access to the abutting property to the east as part of the associated special exception to convert that use to real estate office. A cross-access easement is proposed to allow potential future interconnection to the property to the southeast, which would connect to Lee Street, and this conversion will prevent the subject property from converting back to a single-family residence and associated driveway on Lee Boulevard. As previously stated, the property does reside within the central future land use category, and the property's location on the 6-lane arterial road of Lee Boulevard adjacent to a commercial daycare use further demonstrates the appropriateness for a commercial use at this location. The existing model home has operated in the location since 2002, and the property is developed to accommodate a commercial use. The requested real estate office sales office provides an appropriate compatible commercial use that is consistent with policy 1.1.3. The applicant held the required public information meeting at the subject property on July 1st, 2024 for the variance, fulfilling the requirements of policy 17.3.5 for public input. And pursuant to goal 25, as we covered earlier, for the special exception for the Lehigh Acres planning community, the request will prevent the model home and parking lot from converting to a single family use on a 6-lane arterial roadway while providing for continued compatibility, fulfilling policy 25.8.1. I think that pretty much covers that. So in conclusion, for the special exception, the applicant has demonstrated the review criteria for special exception has been met, and for the variance. In addition, I would like to say staff is in agreement with the applicant's submitted 48-hour letter that corrected typos within the staff report, and also the recommended condition that the development must be in substantial compliance with the special exception and variance site plan dated June 27th, 2024, as we end up possibly editing the information that you are going to provide us after our break.
But with not attaching the betterment plan as well? Can you elaborate, the landscape plan that I asked about earlier, so the staff does not want that to be appended?
I don't think so. I can, during the break, I can confer with environmental and make sure that we didn't need to do that.
Okay.
Okay.
And then I just have basic questions. I don't know, have you experienced or had experience with any of these cases previously when they're converting to a real estate office?
I have not had any experience with the use conversion, only the actual building of model homes in Lehigh Acres, so.
It's an interesting thing because when I started looking at it, when you think about it, right, they're essentially just getting the same use, but being able to extend it without any of the same limitations.
Right.
Because I did some research on the LDC just to familiarize myself, because you don't see a lot of real estate office
Right.
uses It's not defined, but it is restricted in every other instance in the land development code except for this one.
Except for Lehigh Acres, I think, right?
Right, so I'm just curious if it's happened before, because if the intention is that you're trying to remove model homes from Lee Boulevard or any of the other arterials, but this is an avenue for applicants to just come in and convert it,
Convert it, exactly.
has that been used before? And I don't know if the applicant has an answer to that either. It's not, clearly it's permitted under the code. I'm just curious about the policy behind that.
Right.
Because it seems counterintuitive.
I feel like, I know the one model home that I had done, which was almost came in about the same time as this. It was in a different area, and there was a lot of discrepancy as far as like the whole model home within Lehigh Acres anyway, and there are so many along Lee Boulevard that it's like, well, what do we do with them after that? And, you know, obviously converting them to a residential home is not a good idea either. So I think that was why the provisions were put in, but that's just speculation, so I'd have to, you know, ask. Yeah,
It's
yeah.
And typically, and I asked the question before of the use, because typically the real estate office, by definition, is within the larger development that it's serving, and then it's maybe 3 years or 5 years, depending on the underlying zoning of the lot, but there's always a time limitation to it, and the only other time it's spoken about is this section in 33, and then another 34 section under subordinate uses.
Right,
Because
right.
again, it's subordinate to the overall.
Sure.
So I'm just curious, and the concern, you just raised it a few times, was about this converting back to a
A residential use.
but absent putting the lots together, I think you still have that same potential harm, right? Because the cross-access easement only protects the parking lot, and so
True, yeah.
you have the concern that we have a standalone parking lot connected to a daycare center. So maybe, I guess, they could strap that in if they needed additional parking. I don't know. It's just a very unique circumstance. So
Right.
again, if I could get some clarification, if there's any
Sure.
willingness to discuss that, and
Sure.
we can discuss it again when we come back. How much time would we like to take a break for?
How long do you need to get with
I'd
staff?
probably just want to speak with environmental and
So-
15 minutes?
Yeah.
Yeah, I was
Anthony.
just,
Okay.
Yeah.
I did want to add one thing to the record if I could,
Yes,
though. Just because it was a Chapter 10 variance, I neglected to mention that it also complies with the special findings in Land Development Code Section 34-145B4C. Just that Chapter 10 variances will not create an undue burden on essential public facilities. I just wanted to put that on the record as well.
Thank you.
Thank you. At 15?
So we will take a short break and then we'll reconvene at 1:45.
Okay, thank you.